With a lot on the line for the Houston Texans, how does this team compare to the Week 2 version of this team, the first time they went up against Indy, and which Texan player need to have a show-out moment this Sunday?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Locked On Texans fans, Texan fans, listeners, and viewers to this Wednesday's episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team, we know it's every day. We'll get back to every day, but your team every day. Thank you guys for listening and checking us out. If this is your first time watching the Locked On Texans podcast or listening to the Locked On Texans podcast, please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And to all of our returning players from the Himalayas coming back to continue to listen or watch as Cody and I dive into the Texans. Thank you for coming back as we talk shop. I'm your Texans football analyst, John, some sports guy, Hickman. And on the other side of the screen, my man, your insider, your Texans credential media member, Sports Illustrated's own Cody Davis. We got to look at, can Will Anderson realistically win Defensive Rookie of the Year?
Making a late push.
Houston could possibly go for the hat trick with some of these awards out here in the NFL, which would be pretty dope, honestly. We're going to look at...
They could win possibly 4. They got 4 names in a run.
Executive, coach, rookie. Yeah.
On both sides.
On both sides of the ball. That's pretty awesome, man. It should be a fun conversation. We're also going to look at who needs to show out Saturday, prime time versus the Indianapolis Colts. Houston has not had a primetime game all year. If you guys remember, it was fun talking about, well, should it be Carolina? Should it be? They finally got a primetime game, which is well-deserved. But, Cody, listeners and viewers, we kick off today's show looking at how this team is different from the Week 2 team that took on the Indianapolis Colts the first time.
And that's something that Coach DeMeco Ryans has been preaching about over the last couple of days now, because everyone know that the Houston Texans did start off 0-2, and their second loss of the season did come against Indy. And we remember how that game went. They was down, what was it, like 21-10, I believe, at half, somewhere along those lines. A matter of fact, it was 28-10 at the half. And then, in that second half, it seemed like something clicked from the coaching staff to the players on both sides of the ball. And it seems like whatever recipe that they found during the second half of their loss is something that actually set a tone for this entire season. And it's part of the reason why the Houston Texans are entering Week 18 with a chance to go to the playoffs for the very first time since 2019. And like I mentioned, Coach DeMeco Ryans has talked about it over the last 2 days. This team is completely different. So, John, I took it upon myself to go back and watch the first half of that game against the Indianapolis Colts. And here are some of the things that stood out to me really quick. This was a team that was struggling to run the football. And as we know, ever since that they inserted Devin Singletary as RB1, this is a team that has ran the football quite well. As a matter of fact, in the loss against Indy early on in the season, they only rushed for 79 yards. With Devin Singletary, they have had a handful of games where they rushed for over 100 yards. And I do believe that if one of these teams, hopefully the Texans, can establish the run sooner rather than later, that is going to give them the edge. Another thing that I noticed, and John, you're going to love this one. That second half, that first half of that game, the passing defense was terrible. Anthony Richardson, before he went down, he was nitpicking that the passing defense, and then Gardner Minshew came in and was doing the same thing. The defensive backfield wasn't the problem. It was that linebacking core. And John, I remember For 2 days after that game, we were sitting here talking about how concerning that linebacking core was. Well, over the last couple of weeks, this linebacking core has looked really good, taking care of business. We already know what Blake Cashman has done since then. A guy in Christian Harris. You know, he has played basically the best football of his career over the last couple of weeks. And I am 100% positive to say this. I truly do believe that the improvements that we have seen from this linebacking core is going to help this team come away with a victory. And of course, the biggest thing, matter of fact, the two biggest things that stood out to me when I went back and watched just the first half of that game. First and foremost, CJ Stroud did look like a rookie. Now, here we are. You know, there was a moment where he was in MVP consideration. You know, at this point, I don't even consider CJ as a rookie. You know, he is a young vet at this moment, but we all know how CJ Stroud has looked ever since, you know, finding his groove in the second half, and also the coaching. John, I understand Bobby Slow has had, you know, some moments where we like, oh, you know, he still got a lot to learn since that game. However, from Bobby Slow and Matt Burke, Coach D'Amico Ryans, everybody on that coaching staff has made improvements to their play calling, how the way they go about you know, attacking the opposing team on both sides of the ball. When Coach D'Amico Ryan said when he went back and watched that week 2 game, it seemed like it was part of another lifetime because this team has went through so many changes. And I 100% agree because I did the same thing. Here's what Coach D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud had to say about their improvements that this team has made ever since that week 2 loss.
Yeah, we're a completely different team now from our first meeting. You put the tape on, and it's like, wow, I'm encouraged by how much better we've gotten. You kind of know like who we are now. I think early in the year, every team in the league, you're trying to figure out who you are, figure out your identity, right? How are you going to play? So I think now, you know, we know who we are. We know our brand of football, how we have to play, how we have to win games. And, you know, that you figure that out throughout the year. You figure it out through a lot of growing pains, a lot of tough moments, but you figure it out, and we're in a good spot now.
I think I've grown a lot in a lot of different places. I think our team has grown as a whole. I think we've put a multitude of games together to make our team really kind of stick like glue. Like we've come into a great situation of like now we're starting to pick up our chemistry better than ever. So it's like night and day from week 2 to now. So
I know it might sound like common sense to say that the Texans are a complete 180 from the team that lost against Indy in week 2. However, John, you know, like I said throughout this entire season, the one thing I've loved about covering this team and just being around this team almost every single day is watching the growth and development in time. And once again, man, when I went back and watched that first half when it was down 28-10, and just to see how this team has evolved in every single point, you know, from the coaching staff, the players, even Nick Caserio with the players that he had on the field at the time and the players that he literally brought in, man. I truly do believe that the Texans got a great opportunity to go and win this game.
Absolutely. You know, one of the key things that are different from Houston week 18 compared to week 2. Week 2, the Houston Texans allowed, let's go look at this number, 126 yards on the ground, 5.5 yards per carry, 3 TDs, 2 to Anthony Richardson, who went out that game and did not return. But the biggest part was Zach Moss, 18 carries, 88 yards, 4.9 yards per carry. I mean, he was damn good for the Indianapolis Colts in that game. We've seen Houston since that game have stretches of games holding teams under 100 yards, stretches of games holding teams under 90 yards, 80 yards, 2.6 yards per carry here. We've seen what this Texan team has been able to do against a banged-up line in Tennessee. Not as banged up. The Colts are not as banged up up front. Braden Smith played in the first game against the Houston Texans. Right now he's dealing with injuries. Quinn Nelson dealing with injuries. I'm looking at the injury report right now for the Indianapolis Colts. Braden Smith, Ryan Kelly, Quinn Nelson. Right, they got some big guys up front that's dealing with injuries that could not play. Braden Smith, I believe, just came back to action, so he's not 100% himself. But we've seen this Texan team be able to go out there and dominate some of these below average, below average, mediocre offensive lines. And I think that plays in the favor of Houston in week 18 compared to week 2. Right? Another thing, between two quarterbacks, zero. You know what those zero stands for?
What?
Sacks. Zero sacks. Early in the year, you know what was in the Houston Texans' favor? Pressures, raids, the pressure rate, right? What was not in their favor? The sack numbers. In the last 4 weeks, Houston has accounted for nearly 20 sacks. And so I think you're looking at. We're going to talk about who needs to show up for the game on Saturday against the Colts. I think that plays in Houston's favor right now. John Grenard caught a groove. He's coming back from injury. Didn't play Sunday versus the Titans, but we just saw Will Anderson have a dominating game. We just saw Sheldon Rankins have one of those moments, right? And you hopefully you're getting guys back healthier. So John Grenard, Sheldon Rankins, Malik Collins, of course, Will Anderson. And then Cody, I love the way that you mentioned, Derek Barnett is a part of this team now. Kareem Jackson is a part of this team now. Though he only played one game, he's a part of this team now. And if you want to look at a player that can come in and impact the run, Tier Tart is a part of this team now. The Houston Texans brought Desmond King back, who's been very impactful for this deal. We got to talk about that later this week. How we talk about awards, how Nick Caserio has brought in and brought back some of these guys has been very impactful for this team. But Desmond King has been the impact player in terms of being able to stop the run. He's got a couple of sacks as he's returned, being able to break up some of these passes and be a playmaker. So I think defensively, you're looking at a team that's completely different than the team that you saw against the Indianapolis Colts week 2. Right? Do I see the Indianapolis Colts going out in that game and putting up 31 points? Possibly, maybe. I don't know. But
I don't see it.
I do look at a different offense on the other side of the ball. In that game, I mentioned the 0 sacks for the Houston Texans against Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson. They allowed 6 sacks in that game. And I think the difference between on both sides of the ball is I think now you're looking at a team with more defined roles for players, right? Case in point, in that game, rookie linebacker Henry Toto, he played at 81% of the defensive snaps. Right, even if you go the next game, 95, 97, right? But now you're looking at a team that has they got their linebacker situation together, didn't play against the Tennessee Titans, only 7% of the defensive snaps against the Cleveland Browns, none against the Tennessee Titans, 10%. So now you're looking at a team that I think defensively, even with some of their struggles, they have a more defined role for their players up front. I do worry about the secondary still, which is why when we talk about who needs to show up, the guy that I'm going to name is going to be absolutely crucial to this team securing a victory. But this team is almost night and day from what we saw in week 2. I think that how can I put this, man? That I think this team is tougher. I'm gonna put it like that too. They've got punked. They've gotten punked in 2 of the last 4 games. They got punched in the mouth against the Browns. They got punched in the mouth against the Jets. But they've also fought and punched in the mouth the Bengals, the Bucks, right? Some of those tougher games where maybe they shouldn't have had it so close, but the Broncos and the Cardinals, right? They've been able to go out there and punch some teams in the mouth as well. So I think this is just a different makeup and different team compared to what they saw week 2. They're still trying to figure it out. I think it's a little bit more defined now, which is why I think Houston has a real shot to win this game. Houston has a shot to win this game Saturday in primetime. You also have a shot to find whatever type of tickets you want in your area with the Game Time app. You see it at the bottom of the screen. Download the Game Time app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. And if you're listening at home, let me tell you why this is important. Game Time has killer last-minute deals. Game Time has views from your seat. Game Time has the best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time has zone deals where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for big time savings, right? Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKED ON. That is locked on, LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase. Welcome back in, Locked On Texan listeners and viewers. Cody, before we talk about players or people who needs to show up Saturday versus the Colts, I wanted to ask you about Tuesday's practice. Who was there, who was absent, who practiced, and who was there but didn't practice. Just kind of give our listeners and viewers an insight of what took place Tuesday.
For the players who were at practice and it wasn't dressed, but they were able to take part in the walkthrough, because Tuesday's practice was more so of a walkthrough due to the short week that they have with their preparation. Will Anderson Jr., Andrew Beck, Noah Brown, Malik Collins, Jonathan Grenard, Sheldon Rankins, Laramie Tunsil, and Robert Woods. Saw all 8 of those guys, which that is a good thing, because even when guys do not participate in practice, the fact that they are there still, watching from afar, taking notes or whatever the case they might be doing on the sideline, it's always better to have your players there versus when they're not there. It's when they're not there, that's when you need to start getting concerned. So, of course, all throughout the week, later on today, depending on when you guys hear this, I'm pretty sure a handful of those guys, they will actually participate in today's practice. Really quick on Jonathan Grenard, saw him in the locker room Tuesday afternoon. He was walking fine. However, his left ankle was heavily taped. But the good news is he was walking fine, and it seemed like he might have just got done with some type of light workout or whatever the case might be. But, it's just good to know that at least as of right now, the guys that were not a full participant, at least they was there.
So we talk about some of those bigger key guys, right? Like I think Houston is going to need John Grenard. Houston is going to need Laramie Tunsil. And I do want to shout out George Fenn. I had an opportunity to talk to him after the game Sunday. Man, he did a very good job of filling in, battling through his own injury for Laramie Tunsil when he went down and he didn't return to the game. So between Heck, I think Heck was accredited for 3 pressures and the sack that they're going to give to him. They got to do something about that because that was on CJ.
No, that wasn't his fault.
Yeah, I know. But between Heck and Fant, I thought those guys did a very good job for Houston this past Sunday. But this is an offensive line that will be going up against Kwity Paye, who's had a good year. DeForest Buckner, Samson Ibuka, I like him a lot. Ibukam, I hope I'm saying his name right. They got some good guys up front defensively. So Houston will need Laramie Tunsil. Laramie Tunsil is a guy, if he plays, he's going to need to show out. But 2 names I am going to look player-wise and 1 name coach-wise. Player-wise, I'm going to get ready to get killed for this because I know how y'all feel. Y'all want me to go suit up and drop back in deep thirds, which is crazy. This is crazy. Y'all don't want me to drop back, but I need Jalen Petrie to show up Sunday. I need Jalen Petrie. The last game we saw that was a damn good game from Jalen Petrie was a Tennessee Titan game the first go-round. But I need Jalen Petrie to have a monster type of day. And I don't care if he's in the box. I don't care if he's dropping back in coverage. I need for him to be all 10 all game, because when Jalen Petrie is playing well, he's a playmaker. He has not had a lot of playmaker plays this year. Not even going to say opportunities, because the opportunities have been there. He just hadn't taken advantage of them. So I want to see Jalen Petrie show out Sunday. Another guy is going to come on the defensive side of the ball, right? Because this is, I think, an underrated receiving core for Indy. You got a 1,000-yard receiver in Michael Pittman. You got a very good rookie receiver in Josh Downs. He's at 723 yards on the year. I also like Alec Pierce, right? He's 16 yards per catch. You're looking at Downs and Pittman their guys that are 10 to 11 yards per catch. They do a very good job of getting some of their yak yard. Michael Pittman, 500 yak yards on the year. Josh Downs, we know how impactful he can be in his role, in his position. He has 350 yak yards on the year. So I am looking at the combination of Derek Stingley and Steven Nelson, right? I think this game is going to come down to how Houston can make plays from their secondary, because I don't think I have an issue with the front seven right now. I don't. Maybe still some concerns in terms of coverage for the linebackers. But, between the last 4 to 5 weeks, actually dating back maybe 7 weeks, Christian Harris has done a very good job. He's had some lapses, mental lapses. We've seen the game against the Jets, and I think he had some moments just a little bit against the Browns, but I thought he also played fairly well against the Browns. But I like what he's been able to do. Blake Cashman is back on that field. Denzel Perryman is playing some good football for Houston right now. And again, they don't have to put Henry T out there, right? He can just observe from the sideline or be one of those special team players. But I'm not lacking as much confidence in the front seven as I am in the secondary right now. And that is a worry of mine. Houston did bring in Kareem Jackson. Houston Carson has been fairly decent in his role, but they are going up against a great offensive coordinator, head coach, and Shane Steichen, Gardner Minshew, who is a very good, he's a backup quarterback, but he may play himself into a contract with another team. Who's to say that won't happen? But they got beat last time because the secondary was not able to do much with the receiving core because they were able to make plays in and out. So I'm looking at that, and from a player not on the field standpoint, what happened in that first half against the Colts, Cody?
They only scored 10 points.
The second half was a little bit better,
but
the offense in the second half was a lot better because you just saw them go out there and be great offensively and play better. So here's another combination: Bobby Slowick and CJ. They don't win this game if they're not on the same page. They don't win this game if CJ isn't doing some of the simpler things better. Getting the ball out quicker, which is one thing that you highlighted after Sunday. Bobby Slowick making his job a whole lot easier. And then when you need him to knock him out and throw a couple of haymakers, CJ be ready.
I like how you mentioned CJ and Bobby Slowick, and I'm not even worried about them. What I'm worried about is who's going to step up on the offensive side of the ball, not basically in the wide receiving core. Because look, we talk a lot about this team being different from week 2 to week 18, but one of the things that was consistent was Nico Collins. That young man went out and had himself a then career day, because he had about 5 of them throughout the season, but he had a then career day, 146 yards, 1 touchdown on 7 catches. And without a shadow of a doubt, when you see how bad Nico Collins had lit them up, and not only that, Nico Collins is in the midst of a career season and a 1,000-yard receiving season, of course, without a shadow of a doubt, Indy is going to do everything that they can to lock up Nico Collins. However, my concern is who's going to step up as the quote-unquote number 2 wide receiver, or if Nico can't create any type of separation, who's going to step up as number 1? Because as you already know, you don't have Tank Dell, who also played good, by the way, in that game. I believe that was more so his breakout game before we saw what he did a week later against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But after that, will Noah Brown be healthy enough? When Noah Brown is healthy, he is a guy that could come in and kind of, look, nobody's paying attention to me. Let me go out and get someone in the ballpark to 80 to 100 yards. Y'all remember how good he looked in that 2-week span? I believe it was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and then Cincinnati, where he had
250 plus yards.
250 in 2 weeks. But then there's moments where we're looking, saying to ourselves, where is Noah Brown? Who's going to step up and help Nico Collins, Tank Dell, or whoever the case might be? Then you have Robert Woods, to where it's like, okay, I don't know about you, John, but I still am waiting for Robert Woods to have a moment, a game within the season. And if Noah Brown can't get going, he has to step up, because after that, then you're looking at John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson. And those
that's two guys you don't want to count on right now.
Yeah, and look, and that's what I was about to say. Look, no disrespect, but how many times we have been calling on their name throughout this whole entire season, whether they had a fair opportunity or not. So it's like, everything I think with that wide receiving core, it falls on the shoulder of Robert Woods. Because I know without a shadow of a doubt, it's going to be very tough for Nico Collins to come close or replicate the same success that he had against Indy in week 2. And then on the defensive side of the ball, look, there was one name that wasn't on the field when the Texans played against them at NRG Stadium. You know what that name is?
Who was that?
Jonathan Taylor. And look, I understand Jonathan Taylor has, you know, had his moments throughout the season. You know, at that time he had like the contract stuff going on, but he was quote unquote, you know, hurt to say the least. And then he came back, played really, really good. Then next thing you know, he ended up getting hurt and he just came back, about a week or so ago. However, in the 9 games that Jonathan Taylor played, he still looked like he is one of the top running backs in the league. Jonathan Taylor has not had a game where he has rushed for over 100. And when you talk about the running backs who have killed the Texans in the past, his name is right up there at the top. And over the last couple of weeks, especially the game against the Tennessee Titans, both times, by the way, we have raved about the improvement that this team has made on the defensive side of the ball with their run defense. And this is going to be a real test. Trying to contain Jonathan Taylor is going to be a real test, because what I don't want to happen is, regardless who suits up on that defensive front, Jonathan Taylor gets into a rhythm early. The next thing you know, early Sunday morning, we sit here recapping, talking about, man, they finally let a running back get into a zone early and it cost them the game. So I'm looking at that whole entire defensive front. Not only us, but Coach D'Amico Ryans, Matt Burke, they have raved about this defensive front throughout this entire season, rightfully so, and they need to make sure that they stay consistent.
Right now, Devin Singletary is sitting at 135 yards on the season, 1,000 total yards on the season. So shout out to Devin Singletary. But did you know the Colts are allowing 128 yards on the ground? They've allowed 21 rushing TDs, and they allow 4.2 yards per carry. They've allowed a total of 2,000 rushing yards on the season. Did you know that? So, is there an opportunity there for Devin Singletary to have a big day?
Oh, how about this? Maybe this is a game where we finally see both Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce give you something in the rushing attack.
I think, please don't call me a hater, guys, but I think for Houston, no, and I'm serious. I think for Houston, you got to have your best players on the field for this game. And what I like about Dameon Pierce right now is centered around how he looked as a special team player. Honest to God.
No, I don't think we saw much of that against Tennessee like we did against Cleveland.
We did not. But when the carries that we saw of Dameon Pierce against Tennessee were not positive. So I'm looking at an Indianapolis Colts team, bottom half. I think they're sitting at 26 right now, rushing yards allowed per game. Yeah, I would rather have Devin Singletary take 85% of those snaps as a running back right now than anybody else. This isn't just season for Dameon Pierce. Than anybody else, I would rather have Devin Singletary out on that field. But I do think they need to find a way to get Dameon Pierce involved offensively, and I think the passing game will be the best way to get that going. Guys, I want to tell you about FanDuel. If you're a fan, you can duel and win you some extra money. The NFL regular season is wrapping up. There's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is super easy to use, right? First and foremost, there's so many different ways to bet. You got same game parlays. You got make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and much more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and go ahead and make your first bet a layup, a Jalen Green layup, if you will. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL. Welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Cody says something that kind of sad about. UT loss or with a shot to go to the national championship game.
By the way, I was sad about Alabama losing. I'm not a Bama fan. I just wanted Alabama to win.
Naysayer, please.
No, look, I'm not a Bama fan. I just felt if Bama won, D'Amico and Will and John Mechie and everybody in the locker room would have been in a better mood. And if they ain't in a better mood, we get more content. And if we get more content leading up into this game, everybody's happy. And I'm looking at it from a standpoint, hey, if Bama wins, Texans win on Sunday, then they turn around and win the national championship. I might have been bold enough to ask Coach D'Amico for $1,000. To be honest with you, man, he might probably would have been feeling too happy or something. But man, look.
Well, I'm happy them naysayers ain't win.
Oh my God. That was one of the best moments in TV history, by the way.
Yeah, that was great. Speaking of Will Anderson, Cody, realistic chance he can win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Right now, I think Jalen Carter is a favorite.
Yeah.
A lot of people, maybe on a national scale, Witherspoon out in Seattle. He started the year off damn good. But I do think that it's not that many in the running right now for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think Jalen Carter may have I don't know, man. When you look at these defensive stats for these rookies, who's playing better than Will Anderson? Jalen Carter may have that Philly, the Eagles, name attached to him. But I think right now, man, especially depending on how he closes out Saturday, I don't know who you would pick over Will Anderson.
I think Jalen Carter is going to be the favorite only because I think he was a little bit more consistent at what he did throughout the whole entire season. And I only said that because it seemed like after the bye week, that's when Will Anderson really started to get in the groove of things. First and foremost, I just think this whole conversation is cool because, John, as you mentioned, if not Carter, if not Anderson, without a shadow of a doubt, you're looking at Witherspoon out in Seattle. It's funny because all three of those guys could have been in each other's situation. There was a moment where Carter could have came to Houston had, the Texans still picked, what was that, like 12 or 13 or whatever, because at the moment, you remember Jalen Carter's stock was falling. Witherspoon's stock was rising. And then to make things even more funny, if the Texans didn't trade up for Will Anderson Jr., Will was definitely on his way to Seattle. So I just think it's funny that we're talking about three guys that still would have been in this conversation for respective teams.
Those guys could potentially be linked together for a very long time. Very talented draft class.
Oh yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. But I want to say Will has a chance once again, given how well he has played over these last couple of games when healthy. Of course, I think. I'm not going to say that was his breakout game, but I think what we saw against the Tennessee Titans Sunday was his most impactful game. I still think his breakout game was the victory against the Arizona Cardinals. However, it just shows you how great the Texans have been in 2023 because almost every single major season award has the Texans attached to it in one way or another. I think it's safe to say that CJ Stroud has definitely taken home offensive rookie of the year, but executive coach of the year, defensive rookie of the year. You're looking at D'Amico, Nick Caserio, and Will Anderson Jr. All three of those guys have a resume where they should heavily be considered.
Yeah, also Brian Branch for the Lions. I don't think he's going to win it, but he's also a big time rookie. Jalen Carter, 11 solo tackles, 11 assisted tackles, 1 forced fumble, 13 stops, 7 sacks. I think he only has 6, really. 33 hurries, 4 QB hits, 44 total pressures. Will Anderson, 33 solo tackles, 6 assisted, no forced fumbles, 29 stops, 7 sacks, 36 hurries, 14 QB hits, 57 pressures.
And how many pass deflections? There's one
man.
that turned into an interception.
I think he has 2 on the year, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you look at the numbers and then when you look at the impact, I think Will Anderson is the guy to win an award. The Texans may also, as a franchise, win Best Stadium Burger Award, if that's a thing, because of Trill Burgers. I know they better than Toyota. I just want to say that. Thank y'all for listening and watching the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Give me a follow at John_Hickman12 on Twitter. Thank you for stopping by.
As always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, it's Cody COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.